Hello, this is Brett Lonsdale, and welcome to our webinar on getting started with Power Apps. So this is the first webinar in a series, and we're starting off with Power Apps this week. In 2 weeks' time, we're going to have the same presenter, Sandy Ucia, who's going to be presenting on Power Automate, and then a couple of weeks out after that, it's over to me, and we're going to be talking about things like Power BI and getting started with that, and also getting started with Microsoft Teams as well. So there is 4 webinars for you to sign up to, and we'll make sure that we follow up with the links to those as this one closes out. So yeah, I just want to welcome Sandy Ucia, who is a Microsoft Business Applications MVP, has been for a couple of years, and she is also a technical evangelist for Lightning Tools. And recently, at the beginning of this year, just before the lockdown, Sandy Ucia and myself, we formed another company, a sister company to Lightning Tools called Enlightening, that does coaching. So Sandy is also one of the co-founders of that company as well. So yeah, she's going to take over in just a moment. At the end of this webinar, you will have the opportunity to ask any questions. So if you think of any questions as Sandy's talking, please make a note of them, and you will have the opportunity to either raise your hand at the end of the presentation, and we can then unmute you and you can ask your question, or if you prefer, you can also post your question in the questions tab inside the GoToWebinar software, and I'll read that out for you. So yeah, with that, I'm going to hand over to Sandy. So thank you very much, Sandy, and off you go.
Okay, thanks, Brett. Hope everybody's doing well today. Thank you very much for joining the webinar. As Brett said, my name is Sandy. I'm Business Applications MVP, mainly focusing in Power Apps and Power Automate. And as well as what Brett mentioned, as far as my day jobs, I guess. I'm also co-host of the Flow Pro Show webcast, along with Daniel Laskowitz from the Netherlands. That's a mostly monthly webcast that we do live on Teams, and we typically invite guests from Microsoft or from the Power Platform community and talk about what's new in Power Automate. So we'll probably talk about that a little bit more in the next webinar that's focused on Power Automate. But today we're going to talk about Power Apps. And most of it's going to be demonstration, but just want to give a little bit of background first on Power Apps, why you would be interested in Power Apps. This is a getting started webinar, so hopefully those of you who are attending are just beginning your journey with Power Apps, or maybe haven't even used it before and are interested in learning more. So why would you want to? The main reason for Power Apps existence is to allow people to build apps rapidly for it could be for mobile devices, including tablets, or for the browser. It'll work in all of those form factors. And it lets organizations helps them modernize their processes and solve different business challenges. But mainly, it empowers the people who actually know what it is that they need to do their jobs to be able to create these apps, and without having to go to professional developers who have maybe a huge backlog of things that they need to do. More and more people want to be able to do things in a mobile way, on their phones, be able to interact with their business data and work with, do their work actually on a mobile device. And there just isn't enough time in the world for the group of professional developers that exist to be able to create all those apps. So Power Apps lets the people who need those apps be able to develop them if they're something pretty basic, or at least have a lot of input into a more rapid development process that a professional developer can be involved in. So a lot of times that's called citizen developers, the people who are developing apps or workflows in the case of Power Automate, who aren't trained as developers but are able to, with these tools, be able to develop some things on their own, or at least get pretty darn far with them. So Powerapps specifically is a no-code slash low-code app designer. I think it was sort of originally promoted as a no-code designer, but I think as people have used it more and more, they come to realize that it's more kind of low code. You do still have to know some Mm, not code exactly, but be able to understand logic and use formulas and things that are sort of code-ish. So when we do our demo today, we're going to look at some of those things, some kind of typical formulas, and hopefully I'll be able to explain them well enough to you that they're not scary and don't seem any more like, or that they seem like something that you can really do yourself. So Powerapps is part of the Power Platform. And as Brett mentioned, we're having webinars on 3 of those for Power Platform tools. Powerapps, Power Automate will be the next one. So that was formerly the application formerly known as Microsoft Flow. But now it's been brought into kind of under the bigger umbrella of Power Platform, and it's got more parts to it. So that's why they renamed that. And then there's Power BI, which lets you visualize data in different ways. So you can, those 3 especially can work together to, you can use Power BI to visualize the data that is being maybe captured in Power Apps, and Power Automate can be used behind the scenes to get the information from Power Apps and do processing with it, and maybe then make it more available to Power BI, so they can all interact with each other in different ways. And then the 4th part of the Power Platform is Power Virtual Agents, which is sometimes known as chatbots. And that lets you very easily, without having to know code or any sort of AI designer things, be able to use a graphic interface to create a chatbot that answers questions for customers or employees and so on. And that can be integrated also with other parts of the Power Platform, especially Power Automate in particular. Like you can have parts of the chatbot that will trigger a Power Automate flow that goes and does things, and we'll talk about that more in the next webinar as well, I think. But all of those parts of the Power Platform, the whole point of them is to empower the people who need things done. They need to get things done in their job, and they maybe need to use different services to do that, not just Microsoft services, but all kinds of other services. And the whole Power Platform lets you integrate all of that together, and you yourself be able to create things that work within that area. So Power Apps specifically, I'm calling it 4 kinds of Power Apps, really. There are 3 that you'll see on the home screen, but the 4th is kind of a new one. So today we're going to look at Canvas apps, and so you'll see a lot about that, but I'll just mention the other ones. There are also Canvas apps are what let you design a mobile or browser app that looks exactly how you want it to look. You can specify down to the pixel if you want to, where you want things placed and what you want them to look like and exactly what you want them to do. And it has a lot of controls that interact with each other and so on. So we're going to look at all of that. The model-driven apps are typically based on the Common Data Service, and the point of those is you kind of are modeling your business data, what the app requires coming in as an input and what it's going to produce as an output, and then some sort of process that happens in between those things. It's a little bit like a box, I guess. And then there are components that you add to the app which give you the visualization and the inputs and the outputs to achieve that. So you're kind of restricted by what components exist and how you can place them in the app, but it does give you a more process and model based kind of an app. Then there are Powerapps Portals, which basically are a way to give you an external facing site for your customers, for example, to log into. That's typically what it would be used for, um, so that they can have access to their data that's maybe in the common data service, for example, um, or Dynamics, basically the same sort of thing, and gives them, your customers, access to that through a portal that you design in a Power Apps sort of way. And then Power Apps and Teams, which is currently called Project Oakdale, um, is brand new. So it's in preview right now. And that lets you, within a Microsoft Teams channel, be able to create apps that live in that channel essentially and are available to the users who are in that team. And you can create little sort of light versions of common data service tables in that Teams team, and then that can be used within the Power App that's specific to that team. And the quite interesting thing about that is that that's included with your Microsoft Teams / Microsoft 365 license. So for standard connections to Microsoft 365 things, everything in that is free, including the Power Virtual Agents, which otherwise is quite expensive. So if you can do what you're trying to do within a team, then Project Oakdale is probably the way to go. And then I've got a whole slide full of resources here, and we're going to be providing the slides to you in an email because these are all links to things. But on the left side are lots of Microsoft resources, all the documentation for the different types of apps, the connectors list, because that's key to all of the Power Platform, is that you can connect to all kinds of different services. And the connectors documentation is really quite good and shows you what all, for each connector, what all its parameters are, any kind of limitations or delegation issues, which we're going to talk about a little bit later, the different functions that can be used with them, and so on. So that's a really good resource. A page for the pricing and licensing, the Power Apps community forums, which are run by Microsoft for each part of the Power Platform. That's a great place to get answers to questions that you might have as you come along. There are people from Microsoft who reply in those forums, but also lots and lots of community members. It seems like some of them, that must be all they do. I don't know. But that's a really great place to find answers. The Microsoft Learn paths. So the link in the slide is going to be to the Power Apps learning paths. And those give you step-by-step walkthroughs and tutorials on creating Power Apps and doing then from beginner all the way to more advanced topics. And then Microsoft has a couple YouTube channels around both the Power Platform, which includes a lot of Power Apps videos, and then there's a separate Power Apps channel as well that's obviously all Power Apps videos. And those come out fairly frequently around different features or new things that are coming out. There's also a Power Apps blog. I maybe should have linked to that as well. And so anytime there are major new features, then they write a blog about it. And then over on the community side, there are Power Platform global user groups. So again, there's one for each part of the Power Platform. I don't know if there's one for virtual agents yet, though, come to think of it. But this will be the link to the Power Apps one. And so those, back in the olden days, last winter, those met in person. Now I think most of them are meeting virtually, but someday they'll meet in person again. And so then you can find a user group in an area near you and actually attend user groups that are all about Power Apps. There's a group, kind of a loose community group called Power Addicts. I put a hashtag there because if you go onto Twitter, for example, and search for that hashtag, you'll find all the Power Addicts, which are community members who just are addicted to Power Apps and the whole Power Platform, really. They have a monthly hangout where they do usually have demos of things and talk about different Power Apps topics. So that's a really good learning resource. And then there's a monthly community call, which is semi-Microsoft and semi-community, but they usually talk about some new features and do some demos. And then I listed a few sort of curated list of people in the community that have YouTube channels which have really good content. Probably everybody has already seen Shane Young's videos. I think he's got like 150 or something now, Power Apps videos. So he's kind of it on that. But some other ones that also have some good community Power Apps videos are listed there as well. And now we're going to go to our demonstration. See, so what we're going to look at is I've got a little fake community or company training courses. And so I want to create an app that is going to let people just view what classes are available. And in the next webinar, we'll use Power Automate to integrate with that and let people sign up for classes. But for now, we're just going to have an app that shows what the classes are available and the schedule for them and who's the coach and so on. So it's going to be a pretty basic app. So this is it's going to be based off of a SharePoint list just because to me, that's kind of the easiest place to get data, to store data. I mean, SharePoint lists are not a database, so they're not meant to be, but it's an easy place to get data from. And so I've got a classes list and then also a list of coaches, which is a lookup field, and that's assigned to coaches. And the platform is a choice field, which lets you choose from the different platforms that we have courses on in our pretend company. So we'll take a look at the Power Apps homepage. So you can get to this by just you can either go to make.powerapps.com or powerapps.microsoft.com. That's typically what I go to. I'm not sure why exactly, but then that takes you to the home screen once you sign in. So you sign in with your regular Microsoft 365 account, and by default, you would have this available to you with your Microsoft 365 account to be able to do things within SharePoint and Office 365 users, Teams, all of those sorts of connections. That's all included with your Power Apps license that comes built into your Microsoft 365 account. So you don't need to get a trial license or anything like that. It's just when you come, excuse me, get in, excuse me, when you get into connecting to things that are more premium services, which include things like SQL Server and the Common Data Service, then those do require a premium license. And I had that link to the licensing and pricing page. So on your home screen, you can build apps fast, it says here, and you'll see in our demo that you really can. You can either start from data or choose other data sources. It's got the most popular ones here, and SharePoint's one of those. Or you can just create starting from scratch. So the Canvas app is the type of app that we're going to create, but we're going to create it from data. We're going to choose that. But you can also create the model-driven apps that I had mentioned, or a portal right from here. And then it also gives you the links to those learning paths that I had the link to in the slide, so you can get to them from right here. So they've got, beginner and intermediate, and I'm pretty sure there's some more advanced ones too. And then it lists your apps that you've created already. Excuse me. And then down the left-hand side, you can go directly to all the learning. So your guided learning, again, that's the same learning paths. You can go to the community. So that's the community that I had mentioned, the one based on Microsoft. And then also your help topics, which would be your documentation, and some Power Apps blogs entries, Then again, down the left, you go to your list of apps that you have created. And this is where you can do things like go in and edit them, actually play the app. You can export so that you could then maybe import it into a different environment, or even send it to somebody else if, if they've got the connections that can connect to those data sources. Um, Monitor gives you a way of doing some testing. Analytics has to do with how much your apps have been used. And then there are various settings that can be on a per app basis, things like turning on preview on or off preview features or experimental features. That's a pretty typical thing that you sometimes need to do in Power Apps to get certain things that you might read about on the blog, for example, that you want to try out. Then you can go, so you can, if you want to create a new app, you could do that from the home screen, or you could have done it from that app page and say new app and choose which kind, or you can go to create. As usual with Microsoft, there are lots of ways to do the same thing. So this lets you do that. It also gives you some templates on this page. So down here, you could start from a template, and Microsoft has built a bunch of these, which you could use as is a lot of times, or you can open them up, and then save them and do some tweaking of your own, or just use them for learning, because you can see the kinds of things that Microsoft does with these different sort of scenarios, and you can get some really good ideas from these, I think, too. Then on the data section, that is mostly having to do with common data service. So that's the common data service entities, option sets, and so on, and the connections that you have built already. And then you can also get to flows from here and chatbots through the Power Virtual Agents. There's also AI Builder, so that lets you include some artificial intelligence in your Power App. It can do things like scanning business cards and scanning images. That's sort of built into the AI. And then there's also mixed reality, which that's not, I don't know that that's part of AI, but necessarily, but it lets you use your Power App to create some mixed reality scenarios, which is pretty cool too. And then solutions are a way of packaging together Power Apps and flows and chatbots to be able to maybe pass them from one environment to another. Like if you've got a test environment and a production environment, then that lets you lets you do that. So we're going to go right in and create a, scroll up, a Canvas app, and we're going to start from data. So we're going to click on the SharePoint icon to just start from SharePoint, since we know that's what we want to do. And so it gives you the choices. So I've already got a couple things connected. If this was my first time in here, then I would need to create a new connection and connect that to SharePoint. And it'll show you the different sites that are available to you. And I'm going to use this Power Platform demo one. And I want to connect to that classes list that I showed you. So I just click it and click connect. And then it goes off and does its thing and gets that ready. And that's going to create for me a little 3-screen app that'll be very basic, but it will actually be functional without my having to do anything, literally anything. It'll create a 3-screen app that I can use on my mobile device. So that's key to know, that it creates an app in the mobile device size. And if you wanted that to be for a tablet, then you would need to start with the create from blank and then connect it yourself to your SharePoint list or whatever data source you want. When you use the create from data like this, it's automatically going to be this size, and there isn't a way to change that really at this point. You can change it so it goes sideways if you want to change it to landscape mode, but that's not really quite the same thing as a tablet mode. So just to make you aware of that. So this gives me my little app, and what we're going to do first is just play it. You can see that it shows the live data coming from my list, and if I went in right now and I changed something in my list, it would automatically show up here. So this is a huge bonus of the Power Apps design canvas, is that it gives you live data all the time to work with, so you can see exactly what you're going to get in your actual Power App. So I'm going to go up here and click the play button, which lets you preview the app. It could be F5 also. So just to show you what it does real quick. So it gives me this browse screen that lists my class and the platform and the date. So I didn't have to tell it to do that. It just chose which fields to show, and it's usually pretty good about picking the right fields. Then if I click the little chevron, it lets me go to that class and gives me all the information about it. And I could edit that if I want to from here with the pencil. Then it puts me onto an edit screen in edit mode, where I can change any of the fields that can be changed. So in SharePoint, the things like modified, created, and so on, those cannot be changed. But I could choose any of these. Because platform is a choice field, it automatically turned that into a drop down that I can, well, into a combo box actually, that I could choose the platform from and change the schedule. And same with the coach, since that's a that lets me type in one of the coach's names, and then creates that. And then I could click the check to save that, and it would save it back right to the list. So even though I'm just in preview mode, this is a live app really. And so if I change something in here and click the checkbox, then it would change it back to my it would set it back to my list. It would send that change back to my list right now. I could delete it from here as well. And I can go back to my browse screen, and I could add a new one by clicking plus, and then that lets me, it goes to basically that same edit screen that we were on before, but lets me add a new class. And then if I click the plus, so actually let's just do that. What should we have a class in? Let's do Powerapps Portals. Oops. Because we already have one on Oakdale. So platform is Powerapps again, and it brings you up this nice calendar thing. Let's do that just here and not at midnight. Let's pick 12 noon and do myself again. And so that added that to my browser screen. And if I go back to my list, I don't even have to refresh, and I can see that in my SharePoint list too. So just as by way of showing that that is a live app, that even though it says it's preview, it's really live and working. To get out of it, I click the X up here in the corner. So that's our basic app, but let's say we want to make that a little fancier. I just want to show you a couple things that you would be able to achieve with some pretty basic understanding of different concepts. So we're going to look around at the screen and see the types of things we can do and see how much time we have and how far we can get with that. But so the first thing I want to do after I've created an app like this actually is to save it, because it'll save automatically, but not the first time, of course, because you haven't named it yet. So this is something that I often forget, so I'm going to tell you now. You want to save it first off. So to do that, what I just did there, I clicked on the File menu, open the File menu, and here I can name it. So we'll call this our webinar app. And I can give it any sort of icon and color. Let's make it sort of purple for Powerapps. And then I can give it an icon, but you can also browse and upload an icon for it as well. And then describe it, which of course you should always put descriptions on everything for your users to know what it's about. So once I've named it, this is where I could change things like the orientation. So now, because I started it as this app from data, all I can do is just change it to landscape. But if I had started with the app from just from scratch, then I would be able to choose different sizes, like better for tablet or better for browser, or actually change it to mobile and so on. And advanced is where you can tick off those different preview features. But I'm going to go ahead and save it. And I'm going to save it by default to the cloud. And so we'll just leave it called that, save it. And now from now on, it'll just save periodically. And this is where I could share it, but I'm not ready to do that yet. So go back to my app with the back arrow there. And now this gives me, so the canvas that I get in the middle here, obviously, is what the app looks like. And you can increase the size if you need to expand that a little bit, but I think that is good where it is. And on the app, everything that's on here you can click on and change. So each of these things is called a control. And you can see, if you click on it, you can see over on the right the type of control it is. So here I clicked on the word classes, and that's a label. I clicked on, let's see, if I click on the plus sign, then that's an icon type. And if I click on the, let's say the whole gallery itself, then this is part of Browse Gallery 1. That's what it created by default. And I can rename it here if I want to. And I can also see down here there's a little breadcrumb down at the bottom that shows you where you are. So I'm in the gallery, and if I click on that, then it chooses the whole gallery. This thing that it creates is called a gallery. It lets you basically have kind of a repeating rows of data and gives you the data about each item in your data source. But then if I want to click inside one of these things, like say just this title area, then you can see down in the breadcrumb that it's now just on the title. So that's a good way of selecting specific things, but I can also do that over here on the left. I'm on this tree view, which comes up automatically, but you can get to it by using this tree view icon way over on the left. And that lets you you expand and collapse and see your different screens. So these are the 3 screens it created: browse screen, the detail screen, and the edit screen. And you can navigate around by just clicking on them and seeing what the different screens are. And then that's where you can adjust the different controls. And so back on the browse screen, if I go to the browse gallery, to the whole gallery, then each control on there has, like here's just a rectangle, that's just a little tiny line basically. I've got the search icon, so these are outside the gallery, this little search icon. Everything I click on has properties, and you can see the properties either down the right. Here they're kind of organized by type of thing, like things about colors and borders, things about positioning, um, and then there's more advanced. On every control, there's an advanced screen that has more advanced things. But you can get to all of these same properties in this drop down. Here they're alphabetic. So if you know the property you're looking for, you could get to it from this drop down. And as you can see, even just a very basic control like this search icon has lots of properties that you can control. So things like its color and fill and the X and Y positions of it, those would be kind of the most typical things that you would work with on something like that. Borders and various things like that. So lots of controls, lots of properties is my point. And to add these controls onto a screen, you can either use, and we'll do this in a second, you can either use the ribbon menu at the top in most cases, or you can use this plus, this insert over here, and it lists all the different controls that exist, and you can just drag them onto your app. Continuing down the side, there's a data icon, and that shows you the data that you've connected to. So since we did the automatic connection to our classes list in SharePoint, it's showing us that. And you can have media, so that would be for any images or audio files, video files that you want to include in your app. You would need to upload that, and then that's included in your app. And then there are some advanced tools like the monitor and testing for troubleshooting your app. So we'll go back to the tree view. Then up in the upper right, you can see, here's the name of our app since we named it now. This little stethoscope will show you any problems with your app. So it lets you check for any errors in formulas or things like that, and directs you to some help on it. There's an undo, thank goodness, and redo the play that we used already. Here's where you can share it with other users within your organization, and then there's a help. And then across the top, so we're going to look at some of the insert things, but oops, did I zoom that by mistake? Hang on, got the go-to in the way. Yeah, I lost. That was my mouse doing that. I've got the insert where I can insert various things. I can view things like the data sources and media, collections, which we're not really going to cover in this getting started, but it lets you store some data behind the scenes of your Power App. And then you can have variables. You can see the values of any variables that you have. Doggone it. I'm gonna, don't know what I did with my mouse there, but I seem to have lost something. And then use some different actions. So here's where you could add, for example, a Power Automate flow from there. So I think let's just do a quick add another screen, a welcome screen. So to add another screen, we want to insert a new screen, and we can make that from blank. And so it just adds a blank screen. And what I want to do is just have kind of a nice little splash screen to welcome people. And I would want to have that be at the first thing that happens. So when I created it, it stuck it at the bottom of my tree view, but I want to move that up and up and up so that it's at the top. And that means that'll be the first thing that opens when somebody comes to the app. And I want to rename that. So typically I'll rename controls, especially ones that I'm actually using, so that they make sense to when I'm browsing for this or I am trying to find something later, then you can rename any of these controls. And right now this is just a blank thing, but I want to get an image. So I'm going to upload just this background image. And then I want to add it to my screen. So I uploaded it, but it's not on the screen yet. So I want to add, I want to insert an image. So I can do that through the media on the ribbon menu and insert an image. And then the image that comes up is just this little sample thing. So I want to change that to be my thing that I just uploaded, which was Getting Started Background was what it was called. And so that gives me my background. Of course, that doesn't look very good. So what I want to do is go over here to the properties. So this would be one way of doing it, because I think this is an easy way, especially with images and things like that, to get to the properties rather than remembering what they're called and going over to the drop down. But I want it to fill that box rather than just fit like it did. And then I want to have it cover the whole screen. So just looking at, you can position things. So if I want to position this, right now it just kind of randomly put it there, but I can change the X and Y positions very easily. So if I put 0x and 0y, that puts it up in the upper corner. And then for the width and height, what I would like to do is have it just be as big as the screen. And I don't know how many pixels that is off the top of my head. So rather than using numbers, what I'm going to do is use a formula. So that's an important concept in Power Apps, that the properties can have values that you create using formulas, and they can relate to other things. So you can, especially with images, you can position things in different ways. So if I want to say the width of it, instead of making it 320, I want that to be the same width as the screen. So my screen, if I start typing, it'll show me things that start with that or contain that. So if I choose screen welcome, that's what the screen is called. And then I have to tell it, well, what property of screen welcome do I want that image to be as wide as? And that is the width of screen welcome. And so then that automatically makes it just as wide as the whole screen. And then I can do the exact same thing with the height. I can make the height of the image height be the same height as the welcome screen. So, and you use the dot to indicate a property of a control. So the screen welcome is a control, and the dot comes after that to indicate, now I'm going to talk about a property of that control, and I'm going to talk about I'm going to refer to the height of it. So now my background fits the whole thing. And so I can create a little welcome message. That's the whole point of having this, and let people go to my browse screen. So if I want to add a little message, I can insert a label. So before I inserted the image from the ribbon menu, but I could also have done that from over here with the insert. So if I want to insert just a text label, I just pick that and drag it over, and it'll highlight for me the area. So like if I had a couple areas on the screen, it would show me where I'm dragging it to. So I've got my little label there. And I don't want it to say text, but it automatically will pop up. It kind of, Power Apps assumes that when you have a label, you would like to display something in it. So it highlights the text property automatically and shows you this is what it's got there. But I want it to say welcome, so I still need my quotes actually. And I want to put the user's name. So I'll use the word welcome, and you can see as soon as I type, it shows down here in the control. So everything is quite live in the app. I can use the ampersand to indicate that I'm putting together a couple of things. So something literal in quotes, and then I want to grab the person's name that is using this app. So I can use the user function for that. User, and it puts a parenthesis already, and I just want the current user, whoever they are. So I'll just close that parenthesis, and that means the current user. But it's telling me, it's got this red squiggle line, and that means I'm not done yet. It's expecting something more than that, because I have to say, what about the current user do I want to display? So again, I use a dot like I did for getting at properties, and then it shows me the things about the current user that I can easily display. One of those is the person's name. So I'll just put full name. And I really like how you can see below it what that is going to evaluate to. So Power Apps can figure that out, and it's going to be my name because I'm logged in as me. And then you can see right in the app that it put my name in. So it's to give you some different concepts of how you can access things and use the tool tips and the IntelliSense that exists in those formulas to be able to get at things fairly easily. And let's say I want to make this stand out a little bit, so I'm going to use the fill for that. So I want to fill that with a different color. Now, I could pick some RGB color that I know of, the RGB numbers for it, but I can also just type words. So let's say I want that to be some shade of blue, and then it gives me the choices of some blues that exist in Power Apps, and I like the Alice blue. That's nice, a nice light blue, and then it will show it in that color. So I feel like that's a little more intuitive than um, doing RGB, but you can also over here on the side use the fill, these colors. So this would be the fill one, and I get a color palette then that I can choose from if I wanted to do it that way either. So again, more ways to do that. All right. And then the other thing I want to do on my welcome screen, that's nice, but I need them to get to the rest of the app somehow. So I'm going to add a button for that. So here's button over here on the left, and I'll drag that over, add a button, and it'll automatically come over here, obviously, and say button. I want to change the name of it to something like view classes. I just double clicked on that to be able to change that name. And for a button, the default property that it brings up is on select, because that's the main reason you want to use a button, is to have somebody click it. And on select is a behavior type property, which means when something happens, then what's in the formula is what's going to happen next. So when somebody clicks it, right now it's false, meaning nothing would happen. But what I want to happen is for it to go to the browse screen, to that browse screen that was automatically created for us, browse screen 1. So it's really easy to do that. I just click into the formula bar, get rid of the false. And what I want it to do is under actions, I want it to navigate. And Power Apps assumes that I would like to navigate to the next screen, which is browse screen 1, and that I want it to fade. Sure, that's fine. So I don't have to know, this is the syntax of that formula, but I didn't have to know that. I just picked navigate, and I could have chosen one of the other screens there if I wanted to, but that is what I want it to do. Oops, that went away. So navigate, browse screen 1 with a fade. So now if I go, and I could change that color, that fill to match my other one if I wanted to. But now if I go to play my app, it'll start with the welcome screen. And if I click on view classes, then it takes me to the browse screen. Hey Brett, do we have any questions, or should I go on, as I could start now and or stop now and take questions, or stop now-ish? I have a couple other things I would want to show.
Yeah, there's no questions at the moment, so
Okay.
yeah, if you still want to go on for a few minutes, that's great.
Okie doke. All right, then let's see. So let's say I want to change another thing I want to be sure that you understand is that when you change names of controls, then those are picked up by Power Apps, and the names change in the formulas. So we had that button on our welcome screen that navigates to browse screen 1, but really I'd like to rename that browse screen to something that I'd prefer to call it. So I'll use my naming convention of SCR for screen, and browse classes is what I'd like to call it. And if I go back up here and look at that button again, now Power Apps has changed that automatically to the name that I just changed it to, SCR browse classes. So you don't typically need to worry about if you rename something and having to go back to all the things that refer to it and rename those. Power Apps will do that automatically. So that's important to understand. Another thing that I might want to change here is, if you noticed when we went to the details or to the edit screen from the browse screen. So I can go there just to see, without having to press play up in the corner, I can hold down the Alt key. So that's what I'm doing right now. And when I do that, can you see it changes my cursor to a little pointer instead? So that gives me a way of live testing something without having to run the whole app and test it. So I'm holding the Alt key down and pressing, clicking on it. So that takes me to that details screen, and then I can click on the little pencil to edit, and so that takes me to the edit screen. But I really don't want everybody to be able to do that. It's okay if I can do it, but I don't want everybody to be able to do that. So what I can do is use the visible property. This is a very typical request of something in Power Apps. I can use the visible property to limit who can see this pencil icon, or the trash can icon for that matter. So when I click on the icon, right now what it does, it's already set up automatically, is so it uses the on select. Again, that means when somebody clicks on it, automatically it's going to go to the edit, create an edit form, and then navigate to that, excuse me, that edit screen, which lets you actually edit something. But again, I don't want everybody to be able to do that. So I can, over here, when I am clicked on the pencil icon, I can see that there's a property called visible, and it's just on. I can either turn it on or I can turn it off. If I turn it off, then that's no longer visible. But I want to make that conditional, so not just on or off. So that's a limitation of the property pane that's over here on the right, is it just gives you very basic things. Although if I go over to advanced, then I think I could put in a formula there. But another way to do that is when I'm here, I can just click on the word visible, and then that'll take me to the property itself in the dropdown, and I could modify that. So here visible is set to true by default, but what I could do is just add some formula that when that's true, I want it to be visible, and when it's not true, I want it to be not visible. So I'll remove true, and I have that just to save on typing. I have that saved. And so I'm saying that if the user is me, because I'm an admin, then I want that to be visible. And this could be maybe a whole Office 365 group or something, like the owners of a site or something like that. That I want this to be visible. So since it is me and I'm logged in right now, then I can see that pencil icon. But let's say if I change this to Brett, maybe only Brett can do that, then as soon as I change that, now it's not visible because I'm logged in as me, not Brett. Then now I can't see that pencil icon. And I could do the same thing with the trash can. So I'm just going to change it back to me. Then that gives you a way of, depending on who it is that's using the app, they will or won't see certain things. And obviously you could do that with anything then, not just an icon like that. So that's a pretty useful thing. So I think that I guess we've got a couple questions, so we could do that. I just want to show you real quick about the sharing. So once you've got the app set to how you want it, it's been saving all along now that I saved it once. So if I go back out here to the file menu and I want to save it again though and leave a version note, so let's say I made some changes. You'd want to obviously put more detail about that and save it, because you do get a list, you can get at a list of versions, and you could revert to an older version if you did something by mistake and you want to go back to it. So that's useful to know. And so it's saved, but it's not yet published. So that means if somebody else was using this app, they wouldn't yet see the changes that I just made until I click publish. That lets me publish this version. And I would be able to see in my list of versions, if I click on see all versions, for example, that'll show me the versions that exist. and which one is currently live, because that's the one I just published, but I could go back to this one if I wanted to. And right. And then if I want to share that, right now, only I can see this app. Only I could use it. But if I click share, then that'll let me share it with other people in my organization. So I can add specific people, or I could add, I could say everyone, and then that'll be everyone in my organization. That would mean then anybody who has, for example, the Powerapps mobile app on their device would be able to see this when it'll just come down automatically and be available to them to be able to use. And you could send an email to them if you want to. And just to note, so these are people in your organization, or they could be guest users if they are set up through Azure B2B. So in other words, if you have a setup that you're collaborating with a specific other organization, and the people in that organization also have Powerapps licenses, then you would be able to add them as well. But typically, it's just the people in your organization who have that available to them. So I just wanted to be sure to catch that before we go to some questions. And actually also, I'll just show you real quickly one that I had created with some more features to it. So similarly, but just to see some other things that you can add. Oh, I didn't publish that one, I guess. Maybe go back in and edit that one. Oh, so I do. Right. So just to see a couple other things you could do, things like coloring the parts of the gallery or adding images and things like that too. So I can have more materials with that about that in what we send out later, because I'm out of time, so I need to answer questions now. What have we got, Brett?
Awesome. Thank you very much, Sandy. That was really informative and fantastic as always. So yeah, let's go through some questions. So there's the first one is from Mustafa, and that is, can you please give some information about collections?
Oh, sure. Yeah, so collections are, you get to from view, and by default, there's nothing there. So you have to create the collections. There are functions available to actually create the collections. And they it's a way of loading data into the app itself, which makes it quicker. I mean, as you saw, it's pretty quick as it is, but I'm just accessing a pretty small SharePoint list too. So collections can be used to have sort of a temporary repository. They only exist during the time that that app is running, essentially. But then you can add data there and be able to use it. And there are things that you can do with data in collections that kind of on a temporary basis and then save the data out into your underlying list. That's kind of a big question, but we can send some more information on that when we send out the emails later. I've made a note of that.
Wonderful, thank you. That's great. And so there's another question from I think it's Shan or Shan, and the first one is there a way to deploy this app as part of the Power BI app in an additional tab?
There is a Powerapps visualization in Power BI. So yes, you can add a Power App to a Power BI. What's it called? A report or a dashboard? You're more the Power BI person, but yes, and vice versa. You can add a Power BI tile to a Power App. So that kind of goes both ways. So the answer to that would be yes.
Wonderful, thank you. That's great too. And so another question is where would be a good place to look for formula syntax in Powerapps?
So part of the reference materials, part of the documentation, there's a whole section on functions and formula syntax. So that shows you the syntax of each of the functions. I'll add that as a link too, because I don't know off the top of, I don't have that open handy, but yeah, it's just function by function and what the syntax is and what it does and some examples and things like that. So it's also a very good part of the documentation.
That's great, and yeah, we've got a thumbs up for that one. So,
Okay.
and then I guess as a follow-on, is is a sort of a broad description of the types of formulas that are available.
A lot of them are similar to what you might have in Excel, I would say. And I would say the syntax is kind of similar to Excel. So if you're used to that sort of thing, like maybe that's not a good example, but let's say like our gallery. So the formula that puts the items into the gallery is on the items property. And so this was what was built in, or well, actually, this is my app that I modified. So this was not what was built in. It had a starts with instead of in the built-in one. But basically where you've got a function, then something in parentheses, which are the parameters of that function. And as you're typing these, Powerapps does try to help to show what comes next. So like if I was just typing that, it shows me sort by columns, is looking for a table to sort first, and then the next parameter should be the column name, and then the next parameter should be the order that it gets sorted by. So you do get these tooltips too, but you kind of have to know where to start. Like if I didn't know that I wanted to sort by columns, if I didn't know the name of that, then I could go to this function drop down and find different functions that exist. And then it gives me a little bit of information, but well, here we'll just go, like say we pick concatenate, then there's the learn more, and that should actually take me to that part of the documentation. Yes, it does. So there you go. So this gives me alphabetic order of all of the functions that you can use and what they do. So I can see, I was just looking at concatenate. If I click on that, then it shows me the syntax and examples. And so I think it's really good documentation personally.
Outstanding, thank you very much. And I think that is all of the questions. So yeah, I thank you everybody who did ask a question. And
Yes,
yeah, if you
thanks.
didn't and you still have a follow-up, then yeah, Sandy, how can we get in touch with you?
Sure. We can, any of those ways. So Sandy at Enlightening Tech or at Lightning Tools, either way. And then you can visit our websites, either website. I would say maybe the Enlightening Tech address would be the better one for Power Apps questions, since that's mostly what we're dealing with there is Power Platform.
Yep, that allows us to have our Power Platform hats on. So
Yes,
yeah, wonderful.
exactly.
All right. Well, yeah, thank you very much, everybody, for attending. I know there was a question about recording as well, which I answered. So yeah, the webinar was recorded and will be hosted up on the Lightning Tools website and also on the Enlightening website as well. So yeah, you can go to lightningtools.com and look for the webcasts. It's there on the menu item, and it'll also be as a blog on Enlightening Tech as well. So there'll be a little bit of editing and things like that we might do, but yeah, check back from tomorrow and hopefully be able to see the recording there. But we'll also send a link out through the email, along with yeah, if you wanted to sort of build onto this application in 2 weeks' time, in a fortnight, then we'll be looking at the Power Automate session then as well. So that will be Sandy again, showing how to, as you mentioned, register for these classes using a Power Automate flow.
Yep.
So yeah, thank you very much, Sandy.
Yeah,
it's
thank
a
you.
fantastic webinar, and thank you everybody for joining as well.
Yes, thank you so much. Hope you learned something. Bye.